Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast. We're your hosts, Monte Wyatt and Paul Szynski. Wherever you are in life, there is a higher ceiling. This podcast is how you become aware of it and how to take action to push through it. It's time to discover your ceiling. Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast, where we talk about your health, your family, your business. I'm Monte Wyatt.
I'm Paul Szynski.
And if you are a CEO, an executive, or business owner, this is the show for you. We call our audience the achiever because you're always striving for the next level. And we have a great guest with us today. We have an entrepreneur, a gentleman that has built businesses and is exciting. He's got a global organization. We're going to talk about a little bit of that in a moment. But I want to start off with Paul and I having a short conversation of our theme. And our theme is engineering. So when you hear the word engineering, Paul, what comes to mind for you?
I think of someone that's granular, a thinker, someone that likes to cross their T's and dot their I's, because engineers are someone that likes to be precise.
Yeah, I like that.
That's what I think of an engineer.
You know, I like that. Thinking precise. I also think of solving solutions.
Absolutely.
And finding new ways to solve problems, make it more efficient, make it look better, make it run better. So engineers think that way of working better.
You're right. You're absolutely right, Mon. Because they think just a little bit different than just the average person. So
Absolutely.
You're right. That's a great way of putting it.
Absolutely. And so I want to introduce our guest. Jason Owen is a global manufacturing business owner. He grew up on a cattle farm, and he has a degree in engineering. He started a business of affordable structures for livestock called Accu-Steel. And he's managed multiple manufacturing operations, and he's focused on taking you to the next level, to next level of individuals, of your family, so you can spend more time with your farming operation and your family. So really enjoy this conversation. You call yourself an agripreneur, so I like that.
Yeah, a little bit, yep.
And so, Jason, welcome to the show. Jason Owen, please.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Jason, when you hear the word engineering, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I guess, I not to set the record straight right away, but I don't have a degree in engineering. I attended a little bit at Iowa State University, so I had a chance to spend some time up there, and I learned a lot, but I do not have a degree in engineering. When I think of engineering, really what comes to my mind is design.
Yep.
Design is maybe the first part of engineering. Maybe if you think at it from a house perspective, it's really the architect. What do we want to create for value inside a product? And then it can kind of go, once you have an understanding of what the customer's needs are, what their wants are, then we can go back and maybe look at more of that fine tune of the definition of what you feel of engineering, of to go out and then solve that problem, make that design a reality, and do it in a safe, productive, efficient manner for the end user.
I love that. That's good. That's a great way to see it. It's design. It's thinking about the different options, how to do that, and then it goes to that.
Yeah. There's a lot of great engineers that can make things work, but maybe aren't the design side of it. And there's a lot of people, which I'm probably more of a designer, if I had to go back and relook at my career, come up with ideas, come up with the concept of, here's what I think people might want, here's what I think people might purchase. Now we got to go back and figure out if we can make that in a way that is functional, safe, economical, and that's where the engineering comes back into it.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Well, I'm really looking forward to our conversation because you've got some great experience. You've built a wonderful business. You've got a great team, and we're looking forward to hearing some stories from you. So just to get us started, if you would, give us a little history on how you got started into Accu-Steel and what made you go down this path.
Well, I live on my family farm that I grew up on, graduate of Audubon High School, 1993. Like most kids at that time, had an opportunity to go to Iowa State University. Got accepted into the College of Agricultural Engineering, which was kind of a unique group. It was half funded by the Ag College at the time. I'm not sure about today, and was half funded by the engineering school. So, which means that realistically, no one wanted to fund it at the time. The funding was kind of tough in that department. So, I was there for approximately 2.5, 3 years, and I had an opportunity to start my own business. Always have had welding background. My mom's family is from Nebraska, and my grandfather, at the age of 50 years old, had started multiple businesses, but they were not necessarily successful for different reasons. But at 50 years old, started Peck Manufacturing, Peck Augers, which the family's no longer involved with today, but are still being currently manufactured in Herman, Nebraska, by a partner of actually a family that was friends with my grandfather's family. I remember going there to their auger flighting company when I was Edbers flighting when I was a small kid. So it's nice to see that the facility that I grew up around as a young kid is still operational today with the family name on the augers. But and then my dad's side of the family, where I grew up in Audubon, was involved in just seed corn sales and farming. So
You bet.
that's kind of my background, and my opportunity to come back to the farm was through manufacturing. So I kind of did it backwards. Even though I was in Iowa, not Nebraska, I came back to the farm through metal manufacturing. So
Interesting. Interesting. Now, you were telling us a little earlier about how you got into the business that you got into. Tell us that story of how you got the idea of building.
idea for Accu-Steel, you're saying?
The idea
Okay,
for
so
Accu-Steel, yeah.
What Accu-Steel does is we manufacture metal frames, and we put a high-density polyethylene sheeting over it, so we make a tension fabric building. Some people in the agriculture community may call them hoop sheds. We've kind of taken that, we actually almost backed our way into agriculture. A lot of people, since we're in western Iowa, since the business is located on my family farm, a lot of people think we're an ag company. Actually, we got our start in commercial industrial applications. Our first early years in the early 2000s was all through a lot of salt, a lot of commercial projects for grain facilities that our competition at the time either didn't want to do or didn't have the finesse to do. So we did a lot of the complicated projects that companies that were already in the marketplace just didn't have time for, didn't want to mess with. And it was a great way to start our company because we were kind of a contract, custom build shop. How I got started into that, I was building at my farm, I was building concrete boxes, rock boxes for portable concrete plants for a company in Blair, Nebraska called Conoco. And actually, my grandfather had actually worked for the founder of Conoco many years right after World War II. He had worked for him. So there was kind of a connection there. And long story short, we got really good at building rock boxes in a machine shed. And we got so good, we gave up the seed corn dealership and kept building these rock boxes. And eventually the company was needing more rock boxes. So we went into kind of an agreement, kind of sold out to them. I was never really an employee, but I was a contract manufacturer or contract employee for them, and did some economic development in Audubon, Iowa. And there's a company down there called a Manco between a Hamlin and Audubon that's still there today, still building the same products that we started back in the 90s with. And
Hey, Jason,
Yeah.
interrupt you just for a second. You said you call it a rock box. What'd you call that?
well, they're batcher boxes, rock
That's
boxes,
what you call the
surge boxes.
building, right?
What's that?
That's what you call the building.
No, that's
That's
what that's the parts we were building at the time.
Okay.
So we were building big, 12-foot wide by 10-foot tall with gates, air actuated gates, surge boxes. So for portable concrete plants, so they could preload the sand and the rock or other aggregate material, and then we'd make we didn't build them at the time, but make a cement bin, which is an airtight bin. They can use vacuum pressure to move cement dust through. So it was a trailerized, it's like you see on the road projects.
Yeah.
They're trailerized. You can pick the plant up, put it with a crane, build a portable concrete plant, pour concrete for 6 months or 2 months or 6 weeks, and then you can tear the plant down and drive it to the next job site. So you make your concrete right where it's at.
Right.
Where we actually did some really cool stuff with Conoco, and this is a sidebar note, but it was cool. Conoco was still a locally owned, kind of a family-run operation when I was involved with it, and it's still a great operation today, but its ownership's changed. Really good people, but they had set some of the world's record for continuous pours on some of the hotels in Vegas. So like when they start to pour a slip-poured high-rise hotel, when they start making concrete, you can't stop. It's not like you can say, well, we ran out of dirt, or, the rock truck got backed up. They'll close streets. You go through stoplights with the trucks. I mean, they mix the concrete so quickly for those big high-rise projects. The mixer's actually incorporated into the plant. So it's not like a mixer truck like you see going up and down the roads here. They will mix it for 15 seconds, perhaps. for an 8 or 10 yard mix. And this is 30 some years ago. I don't know what they do today. My point is they don't even put it in a mixer truck. They put it in a dump truck, and the dump truck drives it to the pump and then just dumps it into the pump. And that's how, and they had multiple trucks doing that.
So let's talk about this for a second. So you come in and support this mobile unit concrete, and your job is to supply
Feeder parts.
feeder parts.
Yep. I was a feeder supply shop.
Okay. How do you get into a feeder supply shop for concrete?
It's just you knock on doors, you use the relationships that you have, you figure out what industries are hiring.
Okay.
You know, I had other clients at that time besides Conoco. So I was building stuff for Scranton Manufacturing New Way. I was building sweeps and slides for the garbage trucks. I had for a while I had a G&G contract for hydraulic reservoirs. I was young. I was pretty naive, and I benefited from what I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right. Did you seek that? Did you seek that market out, or did it kind of find you?
You know, I would say through my relationship with my mom's family, the Pecks in Nebraska, and they were involved in some of the contract manufacturing also, and their business was getting busier. So it was a weird time in the United States where there was lots of manufacturing, metal manufacturing opportunities.
We're talking 90s?
Yeah, we're talking mid-90s, mid to late 90s. Lots of metal manufacturing. The economy was pretty good. It was pre-9/11. And like today, a lot of the concrete mixer trucks that you see going up and down the road, that drum that the concrete spins in, it's not steel anymore. It looks like it, but it's not. It's plastic. I don't know what to exactly call it, like a reinforced fibrous plastic type. It's because it saves weight, so they can get more concrete in the truck. So at that time, that technology wasn't there. So the alternative materials, just like today, they talk about the car industry in the 90s, was still it was one of the largest users of steel. Today, car manufacturing and steel are not necessarily synonymous. They're not connected like that you thought of prior to maybe the mid 2000s. So there's been a disconnect. So there was lots of metal manufacturing in the United States, and now a lot of that either has gone overseas or the materials themselves have just changed.
So this is interesting. So you find this market and this niche. So then you go back to your shop and you figure out how to create this product that you have a concept on to improve it.
It's their product.
It's their product.
Their product.
Okay, you get the order.
They give me the prints. They tell me this is how we want.
Okay.
So it's just contract manufacturing.
And you do the mold and do
Yeah, well, we build the jigs or whatever we need to do. Yeah, it's not. Okay. I was creating value, but I was more creating value off of their intellectual property. So I was just allowing them to sell. When I started working for Conoco back in the day, I don't know what their lead times were exactly, 18 months. So you need you know that there's going to be a road project that you're going to be bidding on, and you're going to have to update your fleet, or you're going to have to add more portable concrete plants to your fleet. You had to project out maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years on your purchasing. You may not even know that tender's going to happen, or you may know the tender's going to happen, but you don't even know if you're going to win it or not. But if you know if you're going to win it, you're going to have this additional equipment. So it was a very kind of a goofy time and of a growth time. And there was lots of companies like me that had a successful business building other people's products. Yeah. And then that changed dramatically quickly. You went into the election between Vice President Gore and George W. Bush, highly contested election, not unlike what we're in today's environment. And the money, everybody knew the money was going to get spent, but it tightened up. That 99 into 2000, it tightened up. Everything got tight. And a lot of those contracts, even though we were probably, by that time I was at a Manco, so it wasn't as dramatic, but a lot of my friends that were doing the same stuff I was doing, they lost those contracts, even though they may have been more efficient than the company itself building it, because that's all we did. We were better, a Manco, and I'm sure back in the day we'd have probably argued over a beer, but back in the day, a Manco was better at doing certain parts than what the home factory was, because that's all we had to worry about. We didn't paint. We didn't do all the different functions that were having to happen in Blair, Nebraska. We just focused on what we knew exactly how to do, and we did it really well.
You know what that I
But-
like what you just said.
But
there,
companies
Jason.
make the mistake. Yeah, I know. I think I know where you're going.
It is, you know, do what you know what you do, and do it well. And yeah, nobody's perfect, but you found this market, and when you're working, and then you spun off obviously and did your own, and then you're not, your factory actually is set up on your farm, correct? Or
Yeah,
or
our factory, right where we manufacture our buildings, is just, I got on one side of my house is Accu-Steel, and then the other side is our agricultural, our cattle building operation for fattening cattle.
And you got a wife, kids.
I've got 2 kids, so live by myself, but got 2 kids. Yep.
You're a busy man, and doing a lot of stuff. So when you have this company that you have set up, and you have this niche, I call it a niche market. I don't know what you want to call it, but niche market. How is your I don't know, your shop set up? How is that shop set up? Is that set up like an assembly line, or you get your print, you set it up, you're the engineer, you decide this is the product, and then your shop is set up with 30, 40 employees. How does that shop get ran? How does that work to get the product out?
Well, we take our business and we break it into 2 parts. We take it and we break it into fabrication, and fabrications into prefab or final assembly or welding, and then we have the shipping receiving department on the backside of it. So, but when you talk about product line, even where we're at today, and even when we were back then, we built lots of different things. So it's not like you'd go into everybody sees on a newscast where they talk about cars, and they've got, as long as the eye can see, they got 200 F-150s crawling down the line, and this guy's putting the same part on this car, or he's putting the windshields on, or he's jacking on tires. That's not our shop at all. We're much more of, we have a prefab area where we take the prints and we fabricate all the parts, and then we have a fabrication area that's more of an open space with some cranes that we can bring in jigs, or we can lay stuff out, or we can build tables, or we can work on small parts. It's much more flexible than that, because we even though where we're currently at with Accu-Steel, we've got product lines from, say, 30-foot wide to, we build buildings over 240-foot wide now, clear span. But we're not a manufacturing assembler. We've just got a machine just cranking out the same part all day long. We don't have, we've got too much, the customers have too many different demands for us to make that standard of part. So. Yeah,
they design a print specifically for their situation.
Yeah, I mean,
so nothing's
almost
standard.
unless it's a part of a contract for the U.S. military, or if it's a SALT contract for the Iowa DOT, every project's different. So it's going to have its own set of specific parts at the end of the day.
That's interesting. Now, how did you learn your structure and process of your company from working for another company? Because how did you're obviously an engineer-minded person, and how did you get that experience to know what you needed to do to produce a profitable product?
That's a good question. It was probably, early on, I was part of a Western Iowa Manufacturing Association, so I had a chance to go to other people's facilities, and I was always the young guy at the group. Then I was in my 20s, and that was very important for me to be able to get exposed to other people's facilities. I think the competitiveness of it at the time, it wasn't the Wild West per se, but it was a very competitive market where, even before I made the relationship with Conoco, they would have my same parts built by another shop just to see what their pricing would be, see how good they did it. So, I think, and I've always enjoyed competition. I'm not a great athlete by any stretch. You watch people on TV or even at the D3 level in college. They're gifted. God's made them just a little different than the average bear. But I learned so much from sports. Sports taught me that the competition is what makes you better, and that you're really in competition with yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a key component to being successful, is letting that wanting the competition, enjoying the competition. So many people, when they get in, especially today's environment, you get in a competitive environment, and people want to pull back from that because they don't want the pressure of having to compete. And that
Absolutely.
competition is what makes you excellent.
Yeah, either you're going to embrace it or you're not. And embracing that competition to better yourself, because anytime we're all going to fail, and every day you get up, you're going to have problems. The bigger you get, the more problems you're going to have. It's how you handle them.
Right.
And having that competitive mindset, which we talked before, the manufacturing business is probably one of the toughest businesses to be in, and very competitive at this stage.
It's competitive from internal your competition. You've got I've got competition from outside the United States that's very competitive. Obviously everybody looks to China as stealing ideas, and you can go buy a fabric building in a box today for 20% the cost of what it costs to get from me. Now you're going to get 5% of a product, what you're going to get from me, but that competition's out there. We have, unfortunately, we have competition from regulatory pressure on us. There's a very small window for manufacturing to be successful in the United States. Extremely tiny.
So my next question is this: you've been around 28 years now?
It's been
Roughly.
it's been a long time.
I think you started around 96.
I'm 96. Yep.
So you've been around about just 25, 26 years, whatever that number is. Obviously, you've got a little bit of secret sauce here that's kept you around, because there's a lot of manufacturing business in the last few years have disappeared. So what would you say is I think you've already said one, you like the competitiveness and you like to compete. The next question is, why do you think you've stayed around longer than some of your competition?
There's probably the first thing I'll talk about for being a business podcast is I got my first loan at the Templeton Savings Bank. And Larry Sporer was my loan officer at the time, and Larry's now retired, but I continue to bank locally in Templeton. And that's been a great relationship for me. It's taken me time, but I've earned their trust, and when things don't go good, they have my back. When things go good, we've never changed relationships with that. And that's been super important for me. That's what got us through 2008. I mean, there was some years there when we started our business in 01. I started my business right after 9/11. So I incorporated in February of 01, and I had a 19-building contract for the Missouri Department of Transportation. And there's a silly line in these contracts, in an act of war, we can cancel it. Mm-hmm. And I'm literally driving to my bank that afternoon of 9/11, watching the airplanes leaving off it, because the only airplanes in the sky, going back to Washington, D.C. with President Bush. And I go up and talk to my bank, and I said, I don't know what's going to happen, because I had a crew in Missouri that day that was putting buildings up that hadn't even heard about it. They had checked in. This is back when we had bag phones,
Right.
technology. Right. They had checked in, and I remember talking to my dad, and I said, well, we're at war. And he goes, what are you talking about? Because he's a Vietnam veteran. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, you guys haven't heard? They had been working all day. They had not been part of the process of processing what had happened on 9/11. So I go up to my bank that afternoon, and I talked to my bank, and the bank president was there, and we visited, and they've always had my back through this whole process. And that you can chase interest rates, you can be competitive in some places. There's some places you don't want to be competitive. You want to have a relationship. And I've got a relationship with my bank that I'm very proud of. I've worked hard to maintain it. As a joke, I always like to tell people, I only borrow money in one place because I only got to tell one lie. So, that's and my bankers, if he listens to this, he'll look at me, but I've told him the same thing. I'd rather tell my banker all the stuff that's not working right, and then be cautiously optimistic and outperform their expectations. Set the expectation fair, not that everything's doom and gloom, but set a fair expectation. Tell them what's not working and what you're doing to fix it, and have an open relationship with them. That's another thing I see people make a tremendous mistake with is treating their financial partners on the outside of their circle. The closer you can be aligned with your banker or have your financiers aligned with you you are going to be much more successful in life. You don't have to run a business to have that. Share your goal. People don't like that ability to show them what they're thinking. Tell them what you're thinking. Here's my goals. You know, when I finally started using my lender as a goal-based outcome, my world started getting better. There was lots of hard work between there. You know, there's times when our balance sheet and what we had going on maybe didn't justify the amount of money that we had extended to us, but I always kept really clear lines of communication. I always told them exactly what was going on. And I think they shared a mindset that we were building something more than a 1 year's profit and loss. Because it takes, you know, you talk about going from a company that's maybe 20 million to 25 or 30. Is that more profit or more headaches? You may not make any more money, or you may actually have to go out and learn how to do $30 million for the business instead of 15. And you may have a year where you might make your nut on your overhead, but you're maybe not going to put a bunch of money on the bottom line because you have to invest in processes, you have to invest in people.
Welcome to small business.
Yeah, it
is.
But you got to have a partner that'll share that risk and share that reward.
That relationship.
And you can't you can't make them share the risk without having them share the reward.
Now, I want to say something to our audience, the Achiever, just to reinforce what Jason just said. You know, one of the successful reasons why you've been more successful than others is that alignment with your banker. And I think that's a powerful thing. Sharing goals, have a clear focus, on the same page. And I think that's a great thing for our audience, the Achiever, to recognize that's a critical point, because you can go after the lowest interest rate, but you can't always have the right relationships.
And I think we either through dumb luck sometimes, and I'll take luck all day long. If I can get lucky, I'm happy to enjoy luck. Now, the harder you work, the luckier you get. There's all sorts of sayings, you know. But I've never been to turn down good luck. And so we didn't try to. When I got into business, there was a company called Coverall out of Canada, out of Western Canada, and they were the 900-pound gorilla. When we went to a trade show. We've got a little trade show booth material stuff here behind us, kind of, here in the podcast booth. But they would have 30 by 30 block out, and they would have all the latest trade show stuff, and they would have everybody be in a fancy uniform, and they if they wanted to, they could win any project, and they were the big driver in our marketplace. And when I got into this business, the first thing I said was, I'm not here to replace them, because they eventually, in 2008, they were so overextended. They'd been sold. The original ownership had been cleaned out. They brought in new ownership. A hedge fund had owned them out of Boston. Mm-hmm. They had done all the things that a big business is supposed to do to be successful, and they're gone. Yeah. They got wiped out because they got overextended and they're gone. And I never wanted to replace them. So I had a chance. I probably should be a bigger company than I am today. I've seen some people. Side note: I've seen some people I've worked with over the years on some certain products. Take some ideas and try to probably become a bigger company in some ways. But we've always tried to do steady growth and always been focused on the customer.
You know, absolutely. And you know, as small business people, we all have the same problems. Whether you got to build a relationship with your banker, employees, financial structure, all that stuff.
Well, one thing I'll say about the banker, not to interrupt you. One great thing about the bank relationship is that it's a family-owned bank. They've got 2 branches. So when I have a problem, or I have a need, or I have a better thing to say, I have an opportunity, I get local decision makers that can react quickly to my needs.
That
is a huge. Now I'm a little bit insulated because of my experience that I've had. So I don't know what it's like to borrow money in the greater Des Moines area or the Kansas City area. I don't understand those loan committees. I haven't been a part of that process, so I'm a little bit maybe sheltered would be the right word, but it's worked great for me. It's been the right way to grow my business.
Yeah, you know your lane and you're good at it. You know,
I want to ask a question around taking risks. Mm-hmm. So through all the years, you've had some great business. But what's the biggest risk that you have taken, and how'd you get through that challenge? Because we talk about what's your ceiling, breaking through our challenges. I want to hear a story of how you broke through one of those challenges when you took a risk.
You know, I knew that we were going to talk about that. I don't know if I really brought one. I'm kind of more come up with the one that I'm talking about. I kind of have a funny story to get into it, I guess, to start. When we first got this contract with Conoco, we're still pouring concrete floors in an old dirt machine shed that we weren't, because we'd need more room, so we'd pour another 10 feet at a time kind of thing. And steel at that time, I'd have to go back and look, but I think I was buying steel from Cargill out of the port of Katusha in Oklahoma City area, or no, Tulsa area, Port of Katusha. I think it was like 15 or 17 cents for coil, and it was foreign coil. I think it was I don't know if it was out of Russia or it was out of northern China. I don't know where it was coming from. It was cheap, and it was 7-gauge coil, and I had all these contracts for these rock boxes that used all the 7-gauge sheet. And I bought a shear, and we had a press break out at the farm at the time, and I remember we bought mostly through Norfolk Iron and Metal, but this was a Cargill, which you wouldn't think Cargill being in it, but they were sending ships out, so they'd bring them back with steel, and they'd unload them in central U.S., and I think I bought like 4 times as much steel as I had contracts for, because it was just, scrap was worth nothing. But I just went ahead and just filled up, and I remember my parents came out. 'Cause I wasn't living at the farm then; I was living in Templeton, and they came out, and I just kept having trucks show up and kept unloading steel, and I kind of was trying to hide it from them. We had this back part of the shop, and I remember my mom and dad came out, and they said, "What in the hell is going on out here?" Because I just had it stacked to the rafters. I mean, I just couldn't buy enough of it, So that's something where you got to have a little confidence, a little moxie to take that risk to say, "Hey, it's never going to get any cheaper." When COVID hit, and I was at my agricultural banker, Caleb Hopkins. We were at a conference about marketing cattle, how to really market cattle, how to hedge, and it's the same kind of options trading you have in the stock market. How to hedge cattle, how to market cattle, and one of the presenters, the trainers for this company said, the number could never be zero. The number could never be zero. Well, what it was when the oil market went to zero. What's a barrel of oil worth? Zero. And so it was just an interesting time, because I'm sitting there, I've got cattle on feed, I've got a bunch of puts underneath these cattle, and there's puts and calls, and I'm watching the price drop, and the puts getting more. I had a put that was so valuable, and I just got dumb lucky. You can't outguess the market.
Right.
No one would take the other side of the put. I had to take a discount. It got too big. I had to take a discount, and then I was trying to deliver the cattle against the. It was taking risk. It needs to be. I don't know how to tell you. It's you kind of just know when it's a good deal to make. And I've made some bad decisions. Don't get me wrong. I'll be the first to admit it. I have lost money. Now, every time I've lost money, I've tried to learn something. Mm-hmm. I had an old one of my first jobs in town was the guy who told me the only time you learn anything is when you lose money.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of truth to that. But no, it's hard for me to define risk on any one particular deal. I think the other thing that I've gotten to growing the business to now is when we talk about a risk-reward equation, I look at who's in the room with me, taking that on with me now, because it's not. I've grown the business to the point now where it's not a one-man operation. I'm not making as many of those decisions by myself. Mm-hmm. I may still have the ultimate yes or no, but I mostly try to read the room and what people's comfort level. It's like getting into the Red Dot agency. I had a business partner that I trusted, who knew that marketplace, it was a good. We felt it was a good risk-reward outcome. We went ahead and made that, and I think we're working through the benefits of that now. So,
and to that point, you're getting to the place yourself where you want the next generation to get going. You want the next level of management to take over.
I think that is where we're. Me personally, that's what I'm headed to. It's now. I'm not. I don't want to come off this saying I've got everything you need. It still takes. Another joke we have is it still takes money to buy bread and whiskey. It's nothing's free. We still want to be competitive. We still want to be driven in the marketplace. But yes, we're not out chasing work per se. We want to provide excellent value. We want to be the best value proposition, but we're not trying to make decisions on how to get that next sale. Mm-hmm. We want to add value to our customers' opportunity, but we're not out chasing. We're not out, hey, if we switch out this component for that component, yeah, it's not quite as good, it won't work quite as well all the time, but it's good enough. That's not where we're at as a value proposition and what we're trying to make decisions on. We're not trying to be the most expensive, but we're definitely not trying to be the cheapest. We're trying to have the best value proposition.
Right.
It sounds like, Jason, you're in a really good spot right now. And if there was one ingredient of how you've climbed that ceiling and broke through those different ceilings, what would be your one ingredient to say that where you're at today was probably about the most important ingredient in getting there? We all look at financial, people, structure, process. What would you say, core values? What would you say was probably your ingredient that made you who you are today?
Well, I think the people that know me best would tell you, be perfectly honest with you, that I'm not a financial person, and I don't ever try to become one to my bankers or even inside my company. I'm not going to sit down and out analyze a financial report and come up with a different conclusion or anything like that. That's not where we see the value added. I think just setting the direction for the company, and then also just outworking everyone else. I think at the end of the day, it really becomes to, at least where what my skill sets are and what I'm good at. When I started my business, and I'm not necessarily this was a good balance, work-life balance, it was not, and I've paid some sacrifices for that. But if we were in business for 2 years, I would have no problem going to a potential client to try to see if they had products that they were struggling to build because they were complicated, or they had a quality issue with them because of the technology they were using, or they just did not have enough capacity. They couldn't hire enough people inside their circle of workforce. They just could not hire enough people to build for their demand. I would tell them, I've only been in business 2 years, but I really have 4 years of expertise. Because I've worked that many hours.
Right. From what you've said, you're a visionary, and you're a grinder. You work. You're going to outwork the next guy. We had a conversation earlier, and I think this goes with your vision too. Is you saw a niche where you could pick up some great employees, because there's nothing better than have a good team of people. Mm-hmm. And you found this, I believe, in the 90s. Could you talk a little bit about that real quick?
One of the reasons why we were successful, for two main reasons we were successful when I left Iowa State University. Kind of dumb luck, but I had been exposed to enough different types of welding, and I worked when I was in school. That was another big advantage. When I left college, although I didn't complete it, I didn't owe anybody any money. I was always able to pay my way through. So I think the education that I was receiving was matched up to the value for the cost. There was a good value proposition there for what I was learning. Even though I didn't complete it, I thought it was still good value. So we bought some of the latest technology in welders at the time, which at that time, everyone's welders were transformer welders. Which transformer welders are essentially, if it's a 300 amp or 400 amp machine, when you flip the switch on, you're pulling that much amperage through the machine through the whole process. What we had purchased was inverter welders, which were basically like a computer. So when you pulled the trigger on the gun, the welder kicked on, and otherwise was in a standby mode. So it used a fraction of the power, much more efficient. Sounds silly, but if you've got there's literally, back when I was growing up, there'd be banks of welders and huge power supplies coming into these welders. And then when they flipped them on in the morning, they were, you could watch the little meter just spinning outside as fast as it could go, and they may not be welding a thing. Same thing with lights. We talk about lights. Lights were a huge cost to manufacturing. These big metal buildings, and it had all these lights in it. Heating, no one worried about. There was no money left in it for heating. My grandfather's business in Herman, literally his warehouses and where guys worked in the wintertime, a lot of it wasn't heated because there wasn't the money in it for building agricultural equipment. There wasn't the money in it to have heated, nice facilities like they have now. I remember going back in warehouses where there'd be 1 or 2 60-watt light bulbs up in the roof, and that's it. And he carried a flashlight, the old chrome flashlights, with a little red end on it.
Yeah.
That's when you went to go look for parts. You went out there with a flashlight and the forklift, and you went to go find the basket. because that's what the market rewarded you. If you wanted to have a Taj Mahal facility, that's great. You can have a Taj Mahal facility, but the customer wasn't going to pay for that. That's not where the marketplace was. So
Interesting.
yeah, but going back to the farm, so I was able to go back with this latest technology, and then I was able to find a workforce, because at the time work was pretty tight. Workforce was pretty tight. The Omaha market was pretty tight. They were trading workers back. They were here a few years ago. We were kind of in the same boat. We were trading workers back between companies. The workforce was really tight in the Omaha market, Des Moines market. So when you go out to western Iowa, in between the two, I had at the time, there was a bunch of farmers that were 500 to 700 acre farmers that had good equipment, but it was older, and the writing was on the wall. I'm going to have to expand. Technology came up, just like my welders. Technology and farming made it so I didn't have as much tillage to do. I didn't have as much cultivating to do. The GMOs, the chemical components to the business made farming easier. And these guys knew either I need to go get an off the farm job, or I need to go find more acres. Okay? Well, even back from, I'm trying to think back now from on my road's a little different because there's a little cluster of houses. But if you look at all the farms that were actively farming in 1995, say, that are gone today, I mean, like the place is gone. Mm-hmm. And those guys were farming in 95. So I don't know, is that a 1 in 10 are still farming that were farming in 95? I don't know what the statistics are. I'm sure people could look that up. These guys were great. They had run their own business. They knew how to fix their own equipment. Everyone says, well, they knew how to weld. No, most of them didn't know how to weld at the level we were doing, but they were willing to learn. And they had a business mind. They knew what it took to be successful, and they were the best workforce to get started with you could ever envision, because they worked like they were working for themselves. And we tried to pay really good money to them, and we had great relationships. It's just, we gave time off. We tried to work around their schedules in the springs and the falls, and we've tried to do that in the past, and it's different today. I would have guys that would literally get off work. They would work on the weekends and work at nights to get all their equipment ready, and they would only take off to harvest. And they would almost apologize, say, hey, it's going to rain, on Friday, and today's Tuesday, and I think if I take off a couple extra days, I think I can get done. And I have guys now that want that same program. Hey, I'll work for you, but give me time off for farming. They want to take time off to get their equipment ready.
Right.
The mentality is just different from it, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but the mentality is different from what it took to be successful in the '90s from what it does today.
You gotta be flexible in the workforce today, no doubt.
It's way different than it used to be.
It is different animal.
Way different.
Coming back to you said earlier that you're a different businessman than you were 30 years ago. Tell us how you've grown in your mindset and what's changed in your mindset through the years, or even in the last few years, of how you think about business differently and how you think about growth differently.
I think when I stopped, and I just said earlier I'm not a financial person. I mean, obviously I can look at the bottom line, but when I stopped looking at the dollar of the product or the dollar sign, and I started looking at the value proposition to the customer and then efficiency. I think those are the two things that, people that love me the most inside my company would probably say that's what they get tired of hearing about the most, is how we add value in the process. And then how do we be efficient putting that value into the product? If I am always thinking about efficiency and I'm thinking about value, the money will take care of itself. Now you still got to make good decisions. You still got to know your overhead. You got to make sure you're covering your nut on what you've got to. You got to make sure everything's taken care of. I use kind of my own system of we call them buckets. We break down the company's budgets and put them in buckets and how we're going to look at things. I look at labor a little differently than what we traditionally would look like, from a controller standpoint. It worked for me. Eventually, we're going to have to change back a little bit because some of the ways that I've set some things up, more of that. Never had a finance class that I can remember. If I did, I probably didn't go to it. So.
When did you make that switch from thinking about the bottom line or the going after the dollar versus that value and efficiency? It
was probably during 08. 08, there was some really ugly years in manufacturing. There was some things weren't working very good when interest rates came up, kind of during that housing crash. I've been through I'm in that weird group with my friends group that have invested in the stock market, and it's kind of up today, but it could be down tomorrow. But the idea is we've never really lived. I'm almost 50. I've never really been able to go to the market and say, hey, here's $1,000 or here's $10,000 I've saved and I put in the market, and look how it's done. It's gone up and then it's gone down. And then it's gone up, and then it's gone down. And at the end of the day, when you look at what that $10,000 of all the ups and downs, it's like, yeah, I should have bought a boat.
Oh, you're pushing it there.
Well, I know, break out another $1,000. But you understand when I've never participated in the economy that everybody seems to talk about. Well, if you just invest in long term and forget about it, it'll be great.
Yeah.
Chuck up, and then crash. And then you're like, oh, but look how much it's gone up. Well, but look where it started. Look where I'm more. Maybe from his feeding cattle and playing the board a little bit on hedging. I'm more of the guy, hey, where it's up here, let's get out and put our money in the, let's put it in the CD for a little while and see what's going to happen. Oh, no, it's the wrong thing to do. Just leave your money in. I'm not giving any financial advice, trust me, looking into the camera straight here. But the idea that my age group, I had a very close friend that was given a college savings when they graduated high school. I don't know, it was like a $500 I don't know what it was, a certificate
Bond.
or something like that. And they told him, you'll wait 10 years and you'll have a down payment, help make a down payment on the house. I think it was worth like $575. It was after 10 years, and they paid a little tax on it every year. It's just like, oh, thanks everybody. Yeah. Thanks for playing along. So those are I've never had the ability to be able to go put $10,000 in the bank and be, in 7 years it doubles.
Right.
Never. So I've experienced, now today we've got higher interest rates, but they're similar to where I got started at. But there was a big period in time there where money had no value. Mm-hmm. So how does that change your mentality when the real cost of money is essentially nothing? You could look back on it and say, I maybe should have expanded more. Maybe I should have bought more assets. And I think the people who did leverage themselves and bought more assets, I think have turned out really well.
Something that's really profound you just said. You obviously didn't have the confidence in the Wall Street or the dollar, so you made yourself more valuable.
Yes.
You added value, made yourself more.
I don't like.
Great comment, because the best investment is you.
Right.
And just listening to you're a visionary and you're a grinder and get stuff done. And you set back in those financial years and those tough times, instead of worrying about the finances, you worried about how can I be better, and added the value of the product, added the value of the education that you needed to get to be better. I'm telling you, you couldn't have said it any better, because that's exactly what we got to do. I mean, that's what you coach. You coach about, you can't blame anybody else in your problems. It's you. And you got to and the only way you're going to get better is for you to add value, and not only your product, but yourself. And yourself
Right.
is probably number one.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you teach that a lot. And it's really good to hear you come out and say that. And I think anybody that's an achiever out there that's actually climbing and breaking through ceilings is adding value, and they're becoming a better person, a better business person. And but I want to thank you for that comment.
No,
that was great.
You're welcome. I wish it was more planned. It's just how it's trying to develop how I guess when you ask how I've done things, I guess when you go back and think about it, those are I tell a story about sitting on a bubble chair.
Yeah.
Now that sounds dumb, and when we hire a new person to come in, especially in the engineering or design department, we talk about, we have the bubble chair in there, and some of it's because we're got bad backs over the years, and it's sometimes nice that you got to sit with some core strength in your core muscles to sit on a bubble chair. But I use that as an example of that there's such a small spot that you can sit and balance, and there's a whole bunch of that chair where you can sit where you're not going to be in balance, you're going to tip off, and that's how small or how accurate you have to be to get all those different things to align for you to be profitable. You can have 4 out of 5 things be inside that bubble, but that 5th thing is off, and you're not going to make any money. So those things are never the same thing. Every project's different. Sometimes it's the design side. Sometimes it's the supply side of the project. Sometimes it's the delivery. Sometimes it's the management, the people management of it, the customer management, the dealer management. There's how you've advertised that product, how people perceive it coming in. There's all sorts of things that have to align, and it might be the size of a quarter. If you're looking at an 18-inch, I don't know, an 18-inch bubble chair. But the idea is, I've always felt that's a great metaphor for people to think about. Mm-hmm. And then here's the other thing about communication I always like to talk about. It's a 60-40 rule. If you're the one talking, the other guy has a 40% responsibility to hear what you're saying. And if he doesn't understand it, he needs to communicate, hey, I heard you, but I don't know I don't understand what's going on. So when we have communication inside our company, we talk about that 60-40 rule, that it's 60% to get it laid out there, but the other side of it is the person that's receiving it has to be actively participating in that conversation to understand what should or is to happen for it. So, that's become, I think, an important part of one of our metrics, is that 60-40 conversation.
I like that. That's very good. We've had a great conversation. I just want to talk about a couple more things. What's a ceiling that you're trying to break through now? What's your next level that you're working towards?
I once again, I don't know that I came in here with an answer on that. I think what I'm probably trying to do more with my companies is get the managers to understand, even though it's maybe not their sphere of influence, to try to keep it on track, but they see something that they need to talk about. So learning how to communicate about, hey, I'm not in purchasing, but I'm seeing that this is going to become an issue down the road in this for the project, and being able to communicate that across lines. Because as we've grown the company out, there's a lot of things going on that I'm not as actively aware in as I used to be. Where I used to be leading that charge, now I'm more advising on that, or I'm more aware of it, and I may ask a few questions about it, make sure that I'm aligned with the direction that everyone's thinking about going, and then I let it go. Or if I think there's something I'm not aligned with, we talk it out amongst the group. And I think letting people have their say and owning those type of things, even though you may think, well, I'm not sure that's the outcome that they're going to get, but depending on the risk reward of it, is letting that continue, because that's how you gain experience. When you lose money, you gain knowledge when you make mistakes. I think it's more the wisdom game today than it is the telling game, is maybe what I'm continuing to try to work on. And that's not necessarily my natural. My friends watch this, they're going to be like, haha, that's not you. But those are things that I'm working on to try to let that come out a little bit more, to give people a little bit bigger environment for them to excel in.
I love that, because I think communication is a big challenge for everybody, and you got to have a focus on it. And I loved how you're letting your team talk it out. You're letting your team give their solutions, and that gives them ownership. Mm-hmm. When they have the ownership, they're going to do it right. They're going to put their energy to it. They're going to fully go after it. And so I love that you're putting that as.
And I think focus. The other thing is, I've become more of an owner and less of a manager. Is I've tried to limit my. I've tried to let other people be the leader. It's not always easy. Yeah. But with good people, I've learned to just, it's going to be okay. Sometimes you just got to smile and say, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, it is. People's really one of the biggest gears, if not one of the best gears in your company. Because if you don't have the right people in the right seats, you struggle. And as a guy like you that started a company, sometimes it's tough to hand that off to them at times. And it sounds like you're at a level now, you understand that you're growing.
I had good mentors. I'll tell a quick story, if I may, real quick.
Right ahead.
Company out of Atlantic, Iowa, was going out of business called Skyjack. About the same time I was starting a Manco. Excuse me. Neil Smith was the president and I think a minority owner in Conoco at the time. And Neil was a very busy guy. He was a very dynamic guy, really good mentor for me to be around. So we went down, and we went down the day before this big auction, and we walked around the plant, and we kind of talked about the things that we thought maybe had value and didn't have value, and what we might should bid on, and what we maybe let it go, and some things. And we're walking through this plant together. We spent basically all day together, as I remember right. Dan Friscano was the controller at Conoco, and he was super good controller. And I've, that's something that we're always working towards, is getting that interaction between not the financials, but somebody who can run numbers and really, project on what things are going to true cost. And just, it was a really good team for me to be exposed at such a young age. And I always thank the people at Conoco, because they let me be exposed to stuff that I had no business being exposed to at that age. I hadn't earned enough scars to be in some of the rooms that I got to be in. But I was a shiny new object to tell their dealers and their customers, hey, I know we're 18 months behind, but look at this guy right here. I'd wave, and this guy's going to get us back on track, because he's going to be building these parts now. So I was kind of a narrative, so I got to get into some meetings that I probably shouldn't have been into. But one thing I'll never forget that's always stuck with me, and I like to tell the story. We're going through this plant, and we go up to their meeting room, their executive meeting room, and there's a beautiful, I don't know what kind of wood, I'm not big into that, but we'll call it a big oak table. And it's probably 40 feet long. And it's got, well, Neil asked me, he goes, count how many chairs, because I'm thinking we're going to maybe buy some of these nice executive, they're beautiful high back executive leather chairs. I'm thinking, well, that'd be nice. I'd like to have some of them to sit in it. And a man, he goes, count how many of those are in there. So I'm counting around, I think it was like 50 of those chairs. And he goes, I think there's 50 in here. So I'm still thinking like a dummy, like a young kid, like, hey, we're going to maybe, bid on some of these. He goes, how much do you think it costs to have somebody sit in that chair? I said, I don't know. He goes, I bet it's $100 in a facility like this. It was a nice facility. $100 an hour, which today, that's not that much when you look at all the ownership costs. That's pretty cheap by today's standard. So he goes, every time this room's full, they have to be making a $5,000 profit decision every hour this room's full. Said, you can't get 50 people to agree on anything to make $5,000 decision.
Right. And this is the controller.
This was the president of the company. This was the managing president of the company, general manager. I don't know the exact title.
Right.
But he impressed upon me the idea of leadership has to lead. He had a little thing on his desk that says it can be done. And it was shaped like a spear.
Yeah,
perhaps to be used as a spear if necessary. So I've adopted, but those were some of the people, and then having the controller that really worked through the process of when you make a decision. Dan would, when we purchased a piece of equipment or we updated something, we finally broke down, and this will be a little inside joke if anybody inside the company watches it. We finally broke down and bought a plasma table at my facility. We've never had one, and it was a big pain in the ass because we needed a little few parts. We needed something. We'd have to kind of run and go get them, but it was drilled into me when I was a kid, your cut cost per inch or your cut cost per foot. What is your actual cut cost? Everybody days use lasers. Everybody's got latest technology, and they're still fighting that cut cost. You couldn't buy a plasma machine back in the day and run it enough hours in the day versus what you could buy the parts for. Now, there's conveniences and there's some prototyping now we've gotten into, and our business has changed enough that we can justify a luxury and the customer can afford to pay for it because we're doing new products and we're having to but the idea that we can buy a $500,000 CNC plasma machine and actually pay for it to run parts, we can buy those parts way cheaper. I still had to let the company kind of come to that conclusion too with me, because everybody said, we'll start cutting our own parts. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's the right decision. Now I know we need it for the prototyping. I know we need it for the business side of the growing the company. But at the end of the day, knowing your cut cost, knowing your cut per inch, knowing how much electricity, how much manpower, what your overhead, what your cost centers are of that all comes in that controller position. Mm-hmm. And I knew that type of machine would never compete to what we're buying the parts from a laser today. We still have the machine, we still use it, we do a lot of prototyping, we do a lot of really neat stuff inside the company that makes the company better. That's not the machine we really build parts off of.
Yeah.
Because we just can't, it's not competitive.
What a great interview today, Monty.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I want to point out a couple things for our audience, the Achiever, on some of the learnings. You got any big learnings you want to share?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hey, I really enjoyed the talk about, sometimes don't worry about the finances. It's about adding value. I love that, because if you got value, you can charge. You can charge more because you're as a person and product. I like that. That was good.
Yeah, a couple things I want to bring out for our audience, the achiever. Leadership has to lead. I love that statement because you gotta let others think. You gotta let them make sure that they understand the scenario so they can help make the decisions, because then they have ownership of it. So leaders have to lead. And you spent some time talking about being the owner versus the manager. And I think that's a different role that people need to understand, that sometimes you have to step away and let that manager do the managing, and it's two different responsibilities.
I probably lost good people over the years because I didn't start to transition into that role.
Yep.
You know, good people want to be a collaborator. They want to be a part of a management team, but sometimes you got to make room for them. And it just took me a certain amount of time of experience to be able to recognize that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's one question we always like to ask our guests is, what do you want to be known for?
What do I want to be known for? I think from the topics that we talked about today, what comes to my mind is that I want to give my kids, and in general the next generation, a better opportunity than what I've had. And you know, one thing I like to talk about is all the pressures on U.S. manufacturing. That I don't work for my kids. I talk to my kids about this all the time. I'm not building a farm or building a cattle or building a manufacturing operation for them to inherit or them to take over. I want them to find their dream. I want them to do what's important to them. With that being said, it'd be almost impossible today to start the business that I started back in the mid-90s,
right,
the way I did it, by just working hard. You know, I've never had a lobbyist. I've had very little interaction with attorneys. What I didn't know, and I just didn't care, and I just did it anyway and found out later about it, you know. And we cost us some money, but sometimes I think that might have been the cheapest experience in trying to do it right. And I hate to say that, not that we cut corners on purpose, but the idea was we just went ahead and did it. We just worked hard than everybody else. Today, that is not necessarily being taught, and that's not necessarily being rewarded. And I would like to be known that I try to do something to help that next generation of entrepreneurs. And we have some in our area. We got some young kids up in the Carroll County area that are doing feeder shops for, you know, international companies that are welding, cutting, plasing, laser parts. You know, there's a lot of innovation and a lot of untapped potential in our country that we have to be smart about how we set up the system so that can come to the top. Because if we keep that down and we do silly stuff that keeps those people from being successful, that's going to have really long-term detrimental benefits to our society. And so that's something I'd like to try to do, is continue to work forward to try to help make it an easier place for the people that want to work hard and not necessarily get ahead just personally, but get ahead as a society. I think that'd be an important mission to work into.
That's
wonderful.
great.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Jason, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Enjoyed the conversation. And to our audience, the Achiever, make sure you take home some of these tidbits of knowledge to implement into yourself and your business. So thanks for joining us. Make sure you like us, make sure you share it, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.